Timmy Brooks joins us from Synergy Houses to talk about sobriety, finding structure while transitioning out of treatment, and learning how to have fun in recovery. He talks about keeping personal recovery and work as a recovery professional separate and intentional. Enjoy. Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery Podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery. Ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name's Kurt Nider. I'm a husband, a father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
The Illuminate Recovery Podcast is brought to you by Illuminate Billing Advocates. Make billing and collection simple with leader in substance abuse and mental health billing services. Verification and analysis of benefits, pre-authorizations, utilization management, accurate claim submission and management, denial and appeal management, and industry-leading reporting. Improve your practice's cash flow and your ability to help your clients with Illuminate Billing Advocates.
Today, Kurt and I are privileged and excited to talk with Tim Brooks. Tim is the executive director and owner of Synergy Houses in the greater Philadelphia area. Synergy Houses provide safe, sober living environments for people seeking a path to recovery. I know that Tim has also been, really active in the prevention area nationally, going around talking to universities and young adults as well as others to try and, prevent some of these issues that are happening. Tim, we're super excited to have you today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
It's kind of fun. Everybody has a little bit different story, and I love the stories. Maybe everybody doesn't love the stories, but I love the stories. And so, Tim, maybe give us just some information as to how you ended up with sober living homes and how you ended up in the recovery community, and maybe some background as to, where you came from.
Yeah, sure. Our treatment industry is so wide and dynamic, and there's so many different avenues. And I think sober living is, the best analogy for it is like the wild, wild west. It's a lot of asking for forgiveness rather than permission. It doesn't require the certifications or the licensures or qualified folks that have experience or wisdom in the industry to get involved. And so the industry of sober living in general, I think it's very cottaged. I think sadly you get a lot of players that are not people who do what they say and say what they do. And me personally, I'm a person in long-term recovery. I found, like a lot of us that work in treatment, I found the sober pathway when I was 18. I made enough mistakes to put myself in a place where I was willing to look at the reality of who I was as a person, and fortunate enough to have a lot of great people and great resources to encourage me and enlighten me on a process that worked, which was nothing special other than just people, being put in a community and an environment where it was clear that I was around people that thought the way I thought, that talked about living life the way I knew I lived life, and seemed to have to be in a much happier spot, and talked about the things that they did and offered their perspective. And I was able to buckle through the hard days and get to the other end of it. The details of that were some legal consequences and a sentencing hearing with 11 months of sobriety and 100 people from 12-step recovery showing up to support me, and a judge sending me away for 7 months rather than 4 years. And a lot of the challenges of just early recovery that everybody goes through that were just details of me. But in the end, got out the other side and got in life where I was lucky enough to go back to college and was trying to figure out what the hell do I want to do with my life? And for me, always looked at movies like The Wolf of Wall Street and thought that was going to be my destiny. And, the writing was pretty clear on the wall when I was in treatment and in jail that wasn't going to be my destiny, but was lucky enough to kind of recircle with folks that have become prevalent in my life and providing guidance, and learn that I do things well that I really care about. And today the things I care about are recovery, family, sports, friendships. And in this world of recovery, there's a lot of different avenues. And something that I was able to put my finger on is that within structured sober living, I think too many times folks are exactly where I was. I was a young adult. I was in inpatient treatment, and a counselor was passing a couple brochures across the table. I was getting a couple 30-minute phone calls with guys like me, and the therapist was saying, "This is a great program." When in the back of their mind, I think most of the people that work in treatment are willing to acknowledge that most people think, "I think it's a good program," because they're not sure. They're not sure if it's the same as it was. They're not sure if outcomes are consistent. They're not sure what it is. So at a 30,000 foot level, I just wanted to be about trying to solve that problem.
So I'm curious about that. So I think you're right. I think that most, that programs are fairly robust, and there's probably plenty that are pretty connected to outcome measures, but there's probably a lot of therapists out there doing work and hoping that what they're doing makes a difference, where it's not as smooth and transitional as it should be, right? It's not connected as it should be. What are you doing to make a difference in that?
I think it's really simple. It's nothing more than like, committing to some values, having the right resources, setting things up in a position where, decisions are made for people and not for businesses. Being really clear about the services that are provided, and then actually following through on providing those services. And so at a high level, that's what it is, right? And then internally, it's like shaping a culture to maximize the output of people feeling empathy and love and support. It's holding lines of accountability so that through our experiences, we learn that when we choose our way instead of the way that's best for the group, it doesn't go well. And it's aligning with collaborative partners that can be really good at things that we're not really good at, like clinical care, medical services, family counseling. It's creating processes within so that when we have, we get as sober living, we get 20 to 22 hours a day with our guys, right? Like that's a lot of time. People are doing a lot of stuff, a lot of things in that time. They're having a lot of conversations. They're experiencing life. And that's a really keen opportunity for us to like sponge up what's going on with our guys in that time. How are they responding to conversations? What are they doing with that time? And creating systematic processes to communicate that with clinical providers so that we can allow clinicians to like really expedite and understand what's happening in the lives of the guys we care for and do continued work.
I like it. I mean, and just the structure in and of itself and the follow through, which is what I hear, is that follow through. Let me back up just a little bit. And as I'm listening to your story, and I'm sure you share your recovery story a lot, but there's some pivotal moments. As I listen to most people's recovery stories, there's always these pivotal moments where they could have gone either way. I heard you share one where, you stood in front of a judge and he gave you, I think you said 4 months instead of years worth of prison time or jail time. Did you talk about that a little bit, and any other pivotal moments like that shifted you to the direction that was, more towards recovery than, towards addiction?
Yeah. I mean, I love my life today, and that's 100% attributed to the people that helped me in recovery and continue to help me in recovery. And when I got to a place where recovery became part of my day, I wanted zero part of it. Like I didn't want to do the right thing. I didn't want to get sober. I didn't want a spiritual experience. I didn't want to go to treatment. I just didn't want to go to jail. And it was really intuitive to me that in order to try to find a pathway to not go to jail, I had to embrace some of these principles and at least give it a try. Right. And in our structured sober living program, like I talk to a lot of young guys about that. I think as young people, we always fall somewhere along the spectrum from like, I just want my parents to F off all the way to I'm willing to do whatever it takes to find a happy life at any cost. And I also think on any given day, we might be somewhere different along that pendulum. And for whatever reason, through the support of family, great resources, other people in recovery, like I was I was coached into a place of just recognizing that not forever, but for right now, I had to give this thing a really good chance. And if I come out the other end of giving it a really good chance and I don't like who I am, or I don't like what's happened, or I get through the legal consequences, then I'm at liberty to try another way. But I didn't really look at it as a choice. And I wasn't humble about it either. Like, I went into treatment and I heard a therapist say, like, statistically 2 of the 20 of you are going to stay sober and the rest are going to struggle. And I looked around the room. I said, all right, boys, who's coming with me? It's like, and I've got a long lineage of recovery in my family. I've got a father that's been in recovery for 30 years. I've got a grandfather that's got 60 years. And I've got this family heirloom that you never want to have, which is just a big book that's an AA book that's signed down from my grandfather to my dad, from my dad to me. And, there was a tradition in the treatment center I went to where people would leave notes in your big book. And the other day I was sitting with a guy going through the book, and I kind of opened the first page and saw a note that somebody said, which was kind of pointing back to that conversation where they were like, yeah, man, like, I hope you're the other guy. I hope I'm the other guy that makes it with you. Right. And that's, that's a dig on myself, right? Like, I lacked humility in the greatest aspect. And in many aspects today, like, still want more of that. And being on the other side and feeling so grateful and lucky to, like, not have the struggles in my own recovery the way that others do, was no factor of telling the world that I was going to make it and grinding through it. It was just, I think it was about, what the world tries to teach us, which is like, there's a teachable and repeatable playbook out there. It sucks. It's really, really hard. And there's going to become moments that are extremely difficult to get through. And the details within those moments are potentially going to make or break, my ability to live, right? Like life or death. So I've been, to an extent, I've been lucky. But more than anything, like, grateful that I was in a position and had enough motivation to do a lot of the uncomfortable things that led to a life that I really love.
I think the heirloom can be a really cool family heirloom, right? The challenge just becomes, how do you pass it on before it's needed? Right? Because that's kind of one of the challenges with recovery, is there's this 2 sides of the coin where, we're here for people who need help and need coaching, but we'd all be better off if we could figure out how to teach that lesson without someone needing to go through addiction, right? And that's the challenge as a parent, when you go to pass that heirloom on, someday. How do you use that as a tool to say, here's what runs in the family, here's who I am. Use that as a light and a reason to not get started in the first place, right?
Yeah, it's a great point.
Along that same lines, you talked about the importance of coaching. For you, obviously, as you got into recovery, but I think it's an interesting road that a family or an individual has to go down as they're not just getting into treatment, but also coming out of treatment, right? And where to go through that. Most of these people, either haven't been there before or haven't done it successfully yet, right? So as you're seeing those individuals come through, what is it that you're coaching them on as far as the importance of, transitional care or a sober living or lifestyle, where, it seems like a lot of families would just make the assumption, no, they're safer at home, right? Whoever it is, we want them at home. But from our side, we know, in a lot of circumstances, that's much worse, can be challenging because of family of origin and some of those dynamics. How do you coach a family or an individual through that process and knowing what to look for?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are, I think, there's 2 pieces to it, right? There's the individual and there's the family. So, with the individual, like the young adult male in our circumstance, which is who we serve, young adult males 18 to 35, a guy, somebody that comes into our program and has all the fire in the world to grab resources and 12-step principles and clinical care, like, he's the dream case, right? But the reality is that's far and few in between. And the people that have come and embraced it and are the great outcomes that have those lives that we all want for everybody, like at some point in time, they earned their way into a position where they had their arms around most of those things, most of the days. And so, the term coaching, I think within our program, is about teaching guys either through experience or through discussion or through treatment, like how to embrace that persona and be that guy. And like, as it relates to families, like what I tell families is that when I was in high school, I copied other people's homeworks. I showed up late. I sat in the back row. I did not have a relationship with my teachers, but I manipulated my way into getting a good grade because I knew how to work people. But in that same classroom, there was a person who sat in the front row. They showed up on time. They were ready to ask questions because they wanted to learn something. They had a good relationship with the teacher, and that person got sometimes the same grade I did. But when you take me and my family and that guy and his family and you put us in the same room, nobody in the world is wondering why in the same environment we had two completely different outcomes. And I often invite families to look and understand treatment with the same respect that, and with a caveat saying that, success in recovery demands us to be that person in the front of the room that shows up ready to ask questions, that has the relationship with the professor, that cares and is invested in the process. And, Synergy Houses in our program in many ways is about teaching people how to migrate from the back of the room to the front of the room to be that guy. And it's very subtle things, right? I think it's the fact that, when somebody walks into a 12-step meeting, it's a bunch of strangers. And, if we're not willing to make an effort to connect with like-minded people and stimulate relationships, it's not going to happen, right? And so there's, part of entering a community-based program is there's going to be some resources to help people create those bridges, right? Like I'm sitting in my car outside of a golf course about to go play golf with 3 of our residents who are new that showed up in the last 30 days with another guy that's in long-term recovery to show them what fun looks like without a beer in your hand when you're walking around a golf course. Like those things make a big difference where people can get a taste and have a mild perspective of like, wow, like this can be different. And, being around other people that feel like you, look like you, sound like you, all of those things can make a big difference in the paradigm of the willingness for somebody to, maybe the next time they go to the meeting, they do sit in that front row and raise their hand. Maybe they do call that phone number. Maybe they do offer feedback in a group led by therapy. All of those things.
Yeah, sitting in the front row gets a bad rap.
It does.
My mom always taught me as a kid to sit in the front row, and I think she did it because I think if you're in the front row, even on those days when you don't feel like doing it or you're tired or whatever, you just get more out of it, right? And so I think it's kind of one of those. It's a physical example of putting yourself in the right place in the same way that in recovery, you're kind of just constantly trying to figure out how to get your head in the right place, right? And so kudos to you on spending the day golfing. I wish I was a little closer. I would tag along, but that ability to change that mindset and know that there are other fun things to do is really a challenge. So that's interesting that's the process that you guys are going through.
Well, and I think that it's important what you talked about of this dynamic. I heard you say that, sober living is kind of the wild, wild west where the regulating bodies, there's not as much regulations and guidance as to how to run a sober living and how to, have the clinical pieces there. It's kind of an outlier in those senses, like you talked about. How do you mitigate for that piece? Because we all know, well, maybe a lot of us, maybe some of us don't know the challenges that come into sober living when somebody's there that's maybe not quite as engaged or is not quite ready to be there and, ends up relapsing and taking, several people with them. How do you mitigate that or think about that?
Yeah, I think from an organizational perspective, it's really simple. You take the components of mainstream treatment that that formalize organization, and you intentionally integrate them into structured sober living, right? So examples being good financial backing, right? We go out and find partners that are committed financially, so when a pandemic happens, we're not making decisions that are going to have an impact on our residents. You can weather the storm, right? Which is how it works in mainstream treatment. You go out and you intentionally look for governing bodies that are willing to give supervision and feedback to you and audit you if you're ever, unintentionally out of line, right? Which is exactly what happens in mainstream treatment. You don't cut corners, and you don't just, rely on asking for forgiveness if you get caught. You actually go out and you get zoning, and you check with the ordinances, and you go through the borough, and you develop a reputation with the people in your neighborhood and let them know that you're this group here that's trying to provide a purpose, and you deal with it. You deal with the couple people that might not like that, and rather than hiding it from them, and you come out and you just do it, right? And so I think that's us saying, hey, we're here, we want to be here for a while, and we want to do this right. And then, internally, like we have some core values and some principles that we stick to related to people struggling. Like not everyone is a fit for Synergy, and not every fit for Synergy is going to come to Synergy. And the other thing that's true is not everybody that comes to Synergy is gonna find success, and people do fail, and that's the reality of our industry. But what's going to happen when, how are we going to respond, and what is our culture like? And, what we subscribe to is just this notion that, like, no one individual is more important than the community as a whole, right? Which to us means that if somebody is making decisions or providing such an impact on the community that's making it more challenging for others to find a life they're looking for, then they're no longer a fit for our program. And we owe it to our staff, the culture, the existing guys to help steer guys into different programs if that's the position they put them in, right? There's, I didn't come up with this line, but another great program did. And they often say, like, nobody gets kicked out of our program. They just put themselves in a position where they're no longer welcome to stay, right? And that statement, I think, runs really true with all things related to mental health and substance use. Is, it's never, I don't in my own life, like, I don't internalize and feel guilty for the challenges I have in mental health and substance use, but knowing what I know now, I sure as hell feel responsible to actively work on a solution for them. And that's the same perspective that we implore our guys to subscribe to as well.
Well, which is super powerful, because what you're doing, and I can tell just by the words you're using, is that you expect them to be honorable. You expect them to have the highest integrity and honesty, and we're going to show up, and we're going to do, more than what's expected, and all those kinds of concepts. And so what you're saying is accountability. You can choose to do what you want, but there are consequences that come with those actions, and you chose it, right? You can choose this consequence, which may be positive and you want it, or you choose the one where you got to go live somewhere else, and you chose that, and we're okay with that too, right? We love you and we care about you, and it's okay for you to choose those things. I think that's one of the most powerful teaching models that's out there, that, that even parents today are trying to, struggling to learn how to do that comes back to the family dynamic of where we start to have problems. Is we think we're helping people when we enable them, and we don't even realize that's what we're doing.
So our program internally is a structured phase system, which is like a lot of programs. However, the catch with us is that progression through our phases has nothing to do with time. I think too many times, especially as young people in recovery, we put ourselves on these clocks, right? We go in, I'm going to sit in this bucket for 30 days. I'm going to sit in that bucket for 90 days. And we equate success to spending time in a continuum, when the reality is time doesn't mean much. It's just about what are we doing in that time. So we break our progression down into, like, achievable, measurable goals within 3 aspects of life: recovery, structure, community. And through that, conceptually, we are putting the ball in the hands of our guys, and they get to drive that bus, right? Guys get to earn privileges and flexibility in weeks and short months if they choose to be that guy in the front of the room, or if they're willing to work for it. And folks that are having a harder time migrating tend to take a longer period within our program in order to migrate into those roles of flexibility and responsibility.
So important. And I love the structure, right? Just the structure itself is something that some in recovery are not used to, that structure or a healthy structure. And so they need that guideline. And when you lay out the rules very clearly, it makes it so much easier to follow that and to stay within the lines so that you keep yourself safe. So I think it's so important. And I love the detail in which you talk about that structure and how you do it. And even in a sober living where, I'm assuming you're not getting paid by insurance companies, so you don't have that regulating body over you. You really get to decide what your program's going to look like and what your support system's going to look like. And so when you make it the very best, it's got to be all the difference in the world, right? It makes all the difference to that recovery person.
100%. Yeah, we're you nailed it. We're outside the world of insurance pay, so it's all cash pay, and we get to hire great staff and have a great house and really kind of dictate how we want to shape things and create culture and all the above.
So let me ask you this. As you have gone through your recovery, obviously you've learned a lot of the things that, I don't know, maybe they were missing in your recovery and, things that you discovered that could have been helpful or that were beneficial, and you made sure that you incorporated that. What are some of the main tools that you use to stay in recovery yourself? Like, what's that look like today for you?
Yeah. So I'm a member of a 12-step program, which is really the center of it all for me. And so I think specifically as a person that works in treatment, differentiating what I'm doing as it relates to my own self-care in recovery from serving a community that's in a program I support are two totally different things. And recognizing how separate those are and consciously making an effort to nurture, my own recovery is arguably the most important thing. Like a lot of guys, attending meetings, having a routine, recognizing that I don't go every day being the person I want to be, and when I make those mistakes, writing them in the honorable way with integrity, which is not always intuitive to me. I have a lot of great people that are willing to support me and talk to me and help, figure out how I can get to a good place. And then other things like, I thrive in discipline and routine. So it's exercise, prayer, meditation, having balance. And those things are all really relevant in my life. And when I love where I am and when I'm treating people really well, it's usually because those things are really, really sharp in my life.
Yeah, super important pieces. And I love the way you talk about it is you're not perfect and you're not doing it perfectly, and you do make mistakes. And sometimes you engage in behaviors that you're not even aware of, but you've created this network of people that are there to help you go, hey, Timmy, this might not be the way you meant to show up. And you may not have recognized this, but this happened, so that you can correct things that you may not even be aware of.
100%.
What's so those mentors that you have, do they change? Do you have a solid group of mentors? Has that shifted over the years? Talk about that a little bit.
It's shifted a little bit. It's shifted here and there. I think for the most part, it's a core group. But new people come behind and people move and try new things, see new things. But I think, having a couple people in my cabinet that understand what's going on in my life, know what the big problems are, know what my gears are grinding over, and I have a relationship with where I'm willing to hear, embrace, and put into action their feedback is, it's the difference maker. And attending meetings and helping newcomers and trying to nurture healthy relationships and being that person that's honest and capable are all, supporting aspects to having those people stay strong in the way that I have relationships with them.
Yeah. I love that. Talk about you said one of the other things that's really important to you in life now, maybe different than before, but those value pieces was you talked about your family. And I've heard you say, you've got the big book that's been handed down from, several generations. And so it's in your family. What do you do with that? And I guess I'm making an assumption that you have children because you said you had family. So correct me if I'm wrong, but what do you do in that situation? How do you change those patterns or break those chains?
I don't have kids yet, probably soon, but no kids yet. I'm not really sure. I think I look at myself and my family, meaning my dad and my grandfather and the other people, my great uncle, all people, my uncle, all these people that are in recovery, and I was incredibly lucky, and for a lot of reasons, right? But related to recovery, I've got a really great relationship with my dad, and growing up, I admired him, respect him, and looked at his life and always thought, like, if I had what he had, I'd be pretty happy and I'd be good with it. And I talk to a lot of people that are in early recovery, especially young people, and they're unsure if they find the magic that recovery has to offer, are they even going to be satisfied with what that is? And I didn't have that experience. Like, I had living proof with a guy that I respected that if I earned what he earned, I had a pretty good confidence level that I'd be okay with that. And in many ways, like, having that not be a part of my journey made the experience way less challenging to overcome. And there's a lot of little things like that I think made my journey in early recovery not as challenging as others. And as it relates to my own family and kids and what that looks like, I talk to enough parents that are in turmoil, and I've sat in on enough, like, those Zoom webinars where it's, if my children have to deal with that, then so be it. There's not a chance in hell I'm going to be able to cure it. It's hopefully not my fault. And I'm not going to co-sign it. I can promise you that. But I do feel, pretty grateful to, like, hopefully be in a position whenever that is, if it is, to offer resources and be a living example of, like, the alternative that's possible and out there, not just for, kids to be, or for anyone really.
Well, which what you said is so profound, right? Is that you're showing up and you've seen your dad show up and go through recovery and really appreciate the life that he's provided and the relationship that you have with him, which, as you said, recovery maybe was a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but maybe not as challenging for you as some, or maybe not as long as for some as it was for you. And I think that family dynamic, that family support, and that, that example that you exhibit to others of what recovery is and what being honorable looks like, that's different than being perfect and not making mistakes, is huge. It's huge. Relationship is everything. And that modeling is so much more valuable and important than the words we say sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm wondering, Timmy, other than your pending golf game that I know you're waiting to tee off for, what else is in the future for you and Synergy Houses?
What's in the future? A lot of awesome stuff. In 2 months, we're opening 15 beds of collegiate recovery, which is going to be its own property with its own crew of staff to help, to really serve as an experience for guys to have a successful college experience while in recovery. There's 20 colleges within a 15-mile radius of Westchester, Pennsylvania. And we're hoping to position ourselves as really this amazing national option for folks that are in early recovery that want to come to us and get grounded and then transition either into college or transfer from an existing school. So we have a ton of resources, case managers, support staff, a lot of collaborating clinical partners to really set up the quality experience for guys to have that experience here. In the next couple months, we're hoping to finalize the organization of a women's program, which would look like a mirror image of what we currently have for Synergy for Men, which would be a really a really awesome program for women with, 4 or 5 full-time dedicated staff members, program of structure routine. That's going to be all about helping people exit residential treatment and taking those tools, integrating them into life. And when they launch from us, have the support of the world to be independent and successful and happy in the way that those want to be. Where it goes from there, I don't really know. I really don't, but it's been a lot of fun so far. I can tell you that.
Well, it's pretty impressive. And I love that model, right? So instead of being in a frat house, there's a sober place that's going to support their sobriety and their choices. And because, college is kind of a difficult place to stay sober depending on who you hang out with. So I'm just thinking about that scenario as you talk about what you're offering, and it's pretty profound. I love to, just the idea of these guys that are supporting each other and have those case managers and all of those resources wrapped around them, and then allow them to transition into school with that continued support. I love that model. That's pretty cool. I'm wondering, is your sober livings, how far spread are they? In what areas are they just in one locale, or are you, going national with that?
So we're just in Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is about 30 miles west of Philadelphia right now. We have no plans to exit that immediate environment. Will we in the future? Maybe. I don't really know, but for right now, it's really just about making an impact in this local community.
That's fantastic. I love it. One last question that I have for you. I always occasionally like to ask this question, maybe because I just need to add to my reading list, but what are some of your baseline books to read that just, you have to come back to them every so often?
Well, that is a good question. I mean, I read a lot of just boring informational Google, like, hey, what's this? What's that? Have you heard of, CBT or Dharma recovery or whatever it is? And then I'm just ripping through facts and research and all that crap, which isn't really, the most attractive reading in the world, but it's just information. When I was behind bars, I read some Danielle Steele and some books like Unbroken and Tweak and that kind of stuff. But I am not the biggest reading for pleasure guy in the world. A lot of it's just knowledge around the space we occupy, and we work in and trying to figure it out. But probably it'd be better for me to ask you that question so I could dip my toes in that world.
That's a good question. I seem to I seem to take a year and wrap my head around a specific book. And over the last, there's several, I reread Man's Search for Meaning this year, and by Viktor Frankl. So kind of reread that.
That's a good one.
And it's interesting how different things come up as I reread a book and kind of wrap my head into it. I know The Eighth Habit by Stephen R. Covey. He did 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That was just a huge seller. But one I hadn't heard of was The Eighth Habit that he wrote after that. Tons and tons of really fantastic information there, kind of, beyond the 7 habits and incorporating the 7 habits. That one was super, super incredible. Will definitely be a handbook for me in the future. And another one that's as old as the hills that I love to come back to, and I'm constantly thinking about the stories that were shared, is a book by Maxwell Maltz called Psycho-Cybernetics. It was really old, but he talks about the power of the imagination. He was a plastic surgeon, trying to dive into why do some people who I do plastic surgery on think that their life has now been changed miraculously, and others go, yeah, it really didn't help at all. And kind of diving into that piece and the power of the imagination. So I could go on, but those are some that I really love to read and have read most recently. So good question. Love that we've been able to talk today. Timmy, I've heard you talk about a lot of really cool things, and it's got me thinking about other possibilities out there and other ways to help the recovery community be successful, not just on the short term for residential treatment, or some of the lower levels, but long term, which is what I hear you talking about. So thanks for your efforts. Super commendable.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it.
And thanks for being on the show and sharing some of this information. I think there's going to be people that would really like to connect. I know we had somebody on that was in sober livings before, or at least was ranking sober livings as to whether they were really good places for you to get recovery and were not. And so I'm sure people are going to want to get a hold of you because you really do run a reputable program. What's the best way for them to do that?
Probably by email. My email is Timmy, Timmy, @synergyhouses.com.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, I appreciate that, Timmy. And thanks for your time today. And I hope you have a fabulous golf game.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Timmy.